historic conflicts.
When talking about long-lasting wars that have marked human history, it is hard not to mention the 100 Years' War, an extraordinarily prolonged conflict between two European powers, England and France, from 1337 to 1453. Although the name makes many people think that it was a war lasting exactly 100 years, in fact, it lasted 116 years, with countless ups and downs, fierce battles, shifting alliances, the intervention of religious forces, and great historical figures. The origin of the war stemmed from disputes over the succession to the French throne. After Charles IV, the King of France from the Capetian dynasty, died in 1328 without leaving a male heir, the Capetian line came to an end, opening up a complex struggle for the throne. The French side elected Philip VI of the Valois house as king, while King Edward III of England, as the grandson of King Philip IV of France, also claimed the right to inherit the throne. But the dispute over the throne is only the tip of the iceberg. Beneath the surface, there are many deeper causes, such as the great benefits from the wealthy region of Aquitaine, conflicts over control of Flanders, a strategic textile industrial area, as well as the fiercely rising national pride on both sides of the English Channel. This war became a painful yet transformative period, reshaping the history and society of medieval Europe. It did not occur continuously, but was divided into many phases with periods of ceasefire, truce, and then continuation. This was where dynasties rose and fell, new military strategies emerged, warriors and generals made their names in the golden pages of history, exemplified by Edward, the Black Prince, and it is impossible not to mention the heroine of France, Joan of Arc. The first phase of the 100 Years' War lasted from 1337 to 1360, often referred to as the English success phase. At this time, the English army, with its famous longbowmen, a weapon that changed the balance of power for an entire era, continuously achieved resounding victories at the Battle of Crécy in 1346 and the Battle of Poitiers in 1356. Notably, Edward, the Black Prince, emerged, hailed as one of the most talented generals of the medieval period. The French, despite having a large force, were clearly at a disadvantage against the new tactics and the strength of the English army. In particular, at the Battle of Poitiers, the French king John II was captured, leading to a serious crisis in France, both militarily and politically. Next is the second phase, from 1360 to 1396, marking the miraculous recovery of the French under King Charles V, also known as Charles the Wise. He employed a smart guerrilla strategy, avoiding direct confrontation with the English and gradually reclaiming lost territories. With the support of famous generals like Bertrand du Guesclin, the French army gradually pushed the English out of the mainland. This phase shows a strong transformation in the art and military thinking of the medieval period, as asymmetric strategies gradually replaced traditional large-scale battles. However, the troubles of the French court, internal conflicts, power struggles, and the years when Charles VI was insane, opened the door for the English to return to the war with renewed vigor. Henry V of England, a young king determined to reclaim the glory of his predecessors, launched major military campaigns. The Battle of Agincourt in 1415 became one of the most famous battles in history, where the English army, vastly outnumbered but strengthened by their archers, crushed the much larger French forces. This period witnessed the Treaty of Troyes in 1420, an event that took away France's autonomy when Henry V of England was established as the heir to the French throne. However, shortly after, Henry V and King Charles VI both died consecutively, opening a new phase of the war, the phase of France's resurgence. Just when it seemed that the entire fate of the French nation was like a blade of grass before the wind, a young girl of peasant origin appeared, Jeanne d'Arc, whom the French people called Joan of Arc. Carrying strong religious faith and an indomitable spirit, Jeanne inspired King Charles VII, rekindling the flame of resistance for the French nation. In 1429, Jeanne d'Arc led the French army to break the siege of Orleans, creating a historic turning point that brought Charles VII to the throne at Reims amid the people's jubilation. Although Jeanne was eventually captured by the enemy, put on trial and sentenced to death, her courageous spirit and the image of the young maiden defending her homeland became an indelible symbol of France forever. Under the leadership of Charles VII and the successors of Joan of Arc, the French army gradually drove the English out of the territory. The war ended in 1453 after the Battle of Castillon, with a complete victory for the French, leaving only the port city of Calais under English control until 1558. The 100 Years' War left a profound mark on every aspect of the societies of the two countries. It was a powerful impetus for the transformation of France, from a fragmented kingdom divided by local lords to a centralized nation under strong royal authority. The tragedies, suffering, losses, but also miracles and hope forged a French national consciousness stronger than ever before. For England, the defeat in France ended the aristocracy's ambition for continental dominance, shifting the country's focus inward, which was also the underlying cause of later historical upheavals, such as the Wars of the Roses. At the same time, through the war, military technology advanced significantly. The era of knights shining in iron armor gradually gave way to soldiers carrying longbows. Handguns began to appear, replacing traditional weapons, and firearms were used effectively in combat for the first time. In terms of population and economy, this war caused terrible consequences. Villages were devastated, cities ruined, many areas became desolate, not to mention the Black Death pandemic that swept through in the mid-14th century, reducing the population by nearly half. History records those years of famine, disease, widespread looting, and the people's lives struggling in hardship. On the cultural and social level, this event laid the foundation for the emergence of patriotism and national ideology. The French were no longer just a collection of separate kingdoms and territories. Instead, the concept of a unified, independent, sovereign France took deeper root in the hearts of the people. The symbol of Joan of Arc was forever engraved in the public consciousness thereafter. The war also gradually demonstrated the decline of the traditional feudal aristocracy and the rise of the king. But based on the support of the middle class and urbanites, new forces in the social structure, money became the central element of the economy, replacing land, and the state took the lead in building a professional army along with a strong tax system. Moreover, the war was also a crossroads between tradition and modernity. The emergence of cannons, various artillery, longbow tactics, fortifications, and deep moats increasingly played an important role, gradually pushing the knight cavalry units, symbols of early medieval Europe, into the past. If we look more broadly, the 100 Years' War was a clash between two cultures, two ways of life. It was courage, faith, strategic intelligence, along with inevitable mistakes on the path of human history's evolution. Politically, the longest-lasting consequence of the war is probably the complete transformation of the nature of power in Europe. The idea of national sovereignty became increasingly important. Noble lineages that once held feudal power gradually had to give way to centralized monarchies after the war, ushering in a new era, the pre-modern period. From here, the image of women like Joan d'Arc transcends social reality, contributing to shaping the historical and gender consciousness of later eras. The veneration and admiration for courage, faith, and sacrifice for a common ideal become an endless source of inspiration for art, culture, and folklore. If we delve into each campaign, each battle, the history of the 100 Years' War does not simply mean two armies slaughtering each other on the battlefield. Hidden beneath are countless stories about the fates of ordinary people, families torn apart by war, farmers taking up arms to fiercely protect their fields. But it is also a place where strategic talent, loyalty, and love for the homeland shine. More than a century of continuous war has changed not only the fate of two nations, but also opened a new chapter for the European continent. When recalling the early chapters of the Renaissance, one cannot help but think of the bloody lessons of the Middle Ages, where the 100 Years' War left indelible marks on the map of human history. Even in the ashes of burned cities, amid the sound of war trumpets echoing throughout the Loire Valley, life still revives. It is the life of a strong, united France, and an England that, although retreating, is now turning inward, preparing for great leaps in economy, culture, and politics in the coming centuries. The 100 Years' War is not simply a war. It is a tragic story about power, dignity, suffering, and unyielding faith. A bell signaling the fading of an old era and the turbulent new era ahead. Princesses, warriors, princes, kings, and ordinary people are connected in a web of fate, all immersed, struggling, and rising in the fierce flow of more than 100 years of conflict, leaving a legacy that endures for humanity, an immortal epic called the 100 Years'